still have some more work before finishing my 1780s Italian round gown. I still have the decorative pleating that I've made by hand with the scraps of material to add to the sides of the skirt. Still have to hem it as well. And it's kind of hard to do that when it's just yourself, because you got to put the gown on in order to see where it lands with your shoes on and with all the underpinnings, because that really changes the drape of the dress. So I had to figure out then how to hem it by myself, just like sizing it up, or it's going to be interesting. I fell down the rabbit hole of 18th century women's clothing a few years ago when I watched an early episode of this TV show, Outlander, in which a nurse from the 1940s falls through these stones in Scotland, and she's transported back to the 1700s. And in one of the early scenes, when they're giving this woman, Claire, her new clothes, they did a whole scene and to which, what it took to dress back then. And I remember reading an article where the producer said that they had to reshoot that scene a couple of times, and then they had to really edit it down because it took so long with putting the stays on, which are corsets, but they called stays, and lacing them up, and then the shoes and the petticoats. And it was just fascinating to me because you have to have the right underpinnings if you're going to make a period correct dress, because those underpinnings will give it the right drape that it's supposed to have. So the stays were supposed to really flatten the chest and really pinch in the waist. So you have this like flat, small waist, and then the bum roll, where I also got a bum roll. Of course, I've been eating a lot lately. I don't think I need a bum roll anymore, but the bum roll that was supposed to make it puff out at the back. So I fell down that rabbit hole, but it was more than about the actual dress. To me, I was fascinated by the materials that they used back then. And then the more research I did, I got very intrigued by what the clothes said about the person. And the more research I did, I discovered that there was a lot of political meaning behind certain outfits, and the clothes really showed you where you stood in society. My research recently was that I came across these pieces of fabric that really told a powerful, poignant story. And it's the Foundling Museum in London, in Bloomsbury. It's in England. And there was an exhibit a few years back about the fabric that is stored in the museum. Now, a foundling is an abandoned baby. In the period of 1740 to 1761, I believe it was, that this hospital, the Foundling Hospital, took in more than 4,000 babies. The hardship during that time period for a lot of families, they just couldn't afford to feed children. And so a lot of mothers had to make that heartbreaking decision to give up their babies. So a lot of babies were just being abandoned and dying. And the hospital noticed all this hardship. And so he went to the king and he had this hospital chartered, a place where babies can be brought with no questions asked. And just about 20 years, 4,000 children were dropped. I saw another report that said 16,000, so I'm not quite sure what number. I mean, that's a big jump. But either way, it's thousands of babies that were brought to this hospital. What was interesting was that each child was left at the hospital with a little swatch of fabric. And sometimes a name was written on a piece of ribbon or onto the material itself. So baby girl Jane and the day that she was born. The mother would leave the swatch of fabric with the baby in hopes that she would come back and reclaim the child by showing the fabric that she had. So the fabric pieces would match, almost like my ticket to redeem my child. Interesting about the fabric swatches is that it tells a lot about the women who dropped off the babies. A lot of the clothing was tattered, worn. It wasn't just any everyday material that they used to place with their child. These mothers took care and a lot of love to pick the most precious fabric that they had to cut out a little square. They also took care as to the symbolism of what they were picking for their fabric. There's this one swatch that has an acorn on it, and that could have symbolized the hope that this child will flourish, will germinate, a seed that will germinate in the world. Other fabrics have birds on them, meaning hoping probably for the child to fly free. And then there's flowers, a lot of flowers, again, that new life, that hope, that beauty in the world. Fortunately, all those children that were left in this hospital in the 1700s, thousands of them, with their little swatches of fabric to identify who they are, only about 165 were ever reclaimed. You look at the records of the fabric swatches, well, many more of them died a few days later, maybe a few years later. So I found it very interesting that fabric was used in such a way to identify a child, to show the love that a mother had for that child. It was used as a way to tell the story of where that child came from and who that child belonged to. I wondered if perhaps that idea came from scripture. I kept thinking about baby Moses in the basket and how he was identified as a Hebrew because of the blanket that was wrapped around him, and how years later that blanket was brought out to prove that, hey, you are a Hebrew. You are not royalty. This is who you are. So I wondered, in a way, if fabric swatches were inspired by that scripture story. I don't know if it was or not. I haven't come across any research that claims that's how it came about. But the story of the Foundling Hospital also got me thinking about the garments we put on each and every day and what they say about us. And I'm not just talking about our fashion statement out there in the world. We do make a statement with the clothing that we wear. I have been, much to the chagrin of my husband, I have been leaning towards linen dresses and dresses that have been inspired by a different time period. He does look at me when we go grocery shopping like, are you sure you want to wear that? I think he's happier with me just in jeans and barn boots. What are the garments we are putting on? I think about scripture and the garments of praise, the garments of goodness, the garments of love. What are we to put on to really show the world who we are, but who we are in God, who we are as Christians? I heard a story once of a tourist asking an Amish if they were Christian, and the Amish man said, I don't know, you have to ask my neighbor. Meaning, he can't say that he's a Christian. Ask somebody else by how he cares for others or how he acts in the world, his goodness, his grace. Think about what inspired this man to create this place to help children. He was doing good in the world. He saw a need and he wanted to help these children that were just dying on the street. And so what we do in this world, what we put on, says a lot about who we are. Never tire in doing good works. Another scripture lesson that we have from the Bible. Never tire in doing good things. No, we cannot tire. But I think each and every day we need to wake up, and before we put on our clothes, we need to think first about what attitude are we going to wear and put on. What are we going to wear today that will make the world a better place or show the world who we are? If someone was to ask about us, are we a Christian? I wonder what swatch God has when he comes to reclaim me. Years ago when I was a pastor and I was doing a back-to-school children's message, what I did was I took a rolling rack and I put all these articles of clothing on it. And I put little signs on each clothing saying love, forgiveness, friendship, compassion, goodness, smiles. And I said in the children's moment, it's back to school, and we often get a new outfit or two, clothing to wear for the new school year. And I wanted to offer them outfits that they should think about having as well in their wardrobe when they start school. And I talked about what garments are they going to put on that will show the goodness of God to others in the new school year. I'm very fascinated with the messages that clothing sends. I'm fascinated by the research that I am doing right now about the 18th century, and to discover things like these pieces of material that told a story of these children that were abandoned and how very few were reclaimed. So my friends, think about it today. What garment you need to wear to show the world the love of Christ?
Angels before you, angels behind you, angels surround you as you grow. Angels before me, angels behind me, angels surround me as I go. Angels before you, angels behind you, angels surround you as you grow. Angels before me, angels behind me, angels surround me as I Angels before you, angels behind you, angels surround you as you grow. Angels before me, angels behind me, angels surround